This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are talking this evening with a young gentleman we haven't seen for some time, since pre-pandemic times, Mr. Andrew Tierney, who's joining us from Torbreck Vintners in Barossa, Australia. How are you today, sir?
Oh, really good, Jamie. It's great to see you again. It's been a few years, and I was in Toronto last year, but we missed one another. I was really only there for 24 to 36 hours, but it's nice to see you again.
Super. Now, this evening, we're going to be speaking about the Torbreck 2021 Woodcutters Shiraz, which I see as the
Yes.
kind of gateway drug, the gateway bottling into the world of Torbreck. It is your most
Mm,
accessible red, and I
mm.
think it's quite a wonderful example of the philosophy of winemaking at Torbreck. Tell me a little bit about the Woodcutters Shiraz, its origin story, its history, and where we're at today with this 2021 vintage.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I'd love to, Jamie. Well, first of all, Torbreck is proudly 100% Barossa. And Barossa actually encapsulates two regions, believe it or not. It's the Barossa Valley, where most of the fruit that Torbreck farms and works with growers, 30 family growers, comes from. But the Barossa also encapsulates Eden Valley. So we do take a little bit of fruit from Eden Valley. But that wine is one of about 25 wines we make, but it's a very important one. It represents about 40% of our total production.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
as you aforementioned, it's really the gateway drug. You said it's our entry level wine into Shiraz, of which Shiraz and Grenache and Mourvedre are a very important part of Torbreck. They represent 95% of what we do, because only 5% is white from other varieties. But we stick to Rhone varietals, so whether they be Northern Rhone or Southern Rhone varietals. And I don't know whether it's by accident or good design, but when the Lutherans came, they planted those varietals. They planted obviously others as well, but Grenache, Shiraz, and Mourvedre. And when we have Shiraz in our vineyards dating back to the 1850s. And this year we're producing a wine. We produced a wine since 2019, but we're launching it this year from an circa 1852 block. So Shiraz has a really strong accent in the Barossa, and it has a real strong a footprint in our part of the world, but so does Grenache and so does Mourvedre. So 21 Shiraz, a terrific vintage, a very well balanced year. It was quite cool in comparison to 19 and 20.
Mhm.
Those two vintages, 19 and 20, were what we term El Nino vintages. And then we moved into a La Nina cycle. And as we all know, the world's going through some climate change, and we're seeing topsy-turvy weather across both the northern and southern hemispheres as we speak. In fact, there's a cyclone coming into northern Australia as we speak, and they're all hunkering down. So, cyclone being a hurricane, a different word for the southern hemisphere, of course. So the weather patterns are changing. There's no doubt about it,
Right.
and viticulturists and winemakers have to adapt. But 21 was a wonderful balanced harvest. We saw incredible concentration of fruit without the excessive heat that sometimes the Barossa Valley is known for. Not in a derogatory way at all, because I think our old vines are able to manage that. But 21 Woodcutter Shiraz is a great representation of what the consumer might expect from a nice, and I don't like to use that word nice. Let's be more adjective than that. A really impressive, fruit forward, soft, silky wine that envelops the palate and gives this lovely sense of plushness and velvet, while still having a lovely black fruit and blue fruit character in the mouth. It can age for quite some time, but we think it's best consumed within 5 years. And let's face it, the majority of this wine is purchased and consumed within the first 5 days.
So what is it they say that most wines are designed to be aged in the trunk of your car on the way back from the liquor store?
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't do that right now. It's probably a little bit cold in
This is true.
in
This is
in,
true. Yes.
in Ontario right now, and I certainly wouldn't be doing it in South Australia. We had a 41-degree day the other day, so I say to people about storing wine, treat it like cheese. Would you leave your cheese in the car for half an hour You might in Toronto in the winter, but I probably wouldn't, and I certainly wouldn't do it in South Australia.
Sure.
So treat it like cheese and store it like cheese and serve it like cheese, and you'll be fine.
Now, there are some people who still believe that vintage doesn't matter when it comes to Australian wine. And I've been thinking, I was looking back at my tasting notes on a number of Barossa wines, and I certainly do enjoy the cooler vintages. And in this vintage here, you've had a series of cooler vintages, right, recently?
Yeah, we have.
I really like, I mean, there is a consistent freshness that I've found recently all across the range in the Torbreck wines, but it's particularly noticeable in the last few vintages. And I find that in this 2021, they're really elevated aromatics as well as that quite bright acidity. There's a vitality in this, and it has a complexity that one wouldn't necessarily expect in a wine at this price point. Now, it's $30, right? Which for many people is a much more premium product. But then it's coming from a winery known for its meticulous attention to detail and fruit sourcing and vinification. Now, this comes from 7 different spots in the 2021 vintage, I believe. Where is that coming from? Because you source from Western and Northern Barossa, right? For the most part,
it's coming from 7 different sub-regions. So
yes, yeah,
the parcel can be made from up to 50 different parcels of Shiraz from our growers, and also from our own vineyards. And we have 5 estates at Torbreck, and they comprise about 120 hectares. So of different ages and of different plantings. But Woodcutter Shiraz is most generally vineyards under about 30 to 40 years of age. It's not the old vine vineyards that we farm or we work with growers with. So you're seeing a freshness. There is some irrigated vineyards in that because young vineyards need to be irrigated, so they establish a root system that will sustain them for the rest of their lives. And that generally doesn't happen until they're at least 50 plus years of age, and that root system is well entrenched into the soil. The freshness and the vitality, I like those words. You're seeing that because of the harvest, the 21 harvest. You're also seeing that because of the care and attention we take to making this wine, not just through vinification, but also through blending. I just want to step back on one of your points that I think is really pertinent, and that is you mentioned about some people think that vintage doesn't really matter in Australia.
Yes.
Well, the word Australia is sometimes confused with fine Barossa wine, or whether it be fine Margaret River wine, and let me dissect that really quickly. Australia is a continent, and we have 65 different viticultural regions. And when you pile that all into the word Australia, it gets confusing. It'll be like calling Burgundian wine French wine, or Californian wine, even Napa wine, American wine. That's how generic that term is. So when Australian wine the word Australian wine is used, that's fine. That's our continent, but it doesn't talk much more than that. And so we like to discuss more about the continent of Australia being Barossa in our instance,
of course,
just like the Margaret River winemakers would talk about Margaret River. So the weather patterns are completely different from one region to the next. So harvest does matter when you're buying from a series producer that are making shall we say more fine wine as opposed to beverage wine. That's when it really matters. Now, there's nothing wrong with beverage wine, commercial access wine, no problem at all. I mean, that's made for a reason, and I think vintage probably matters a little less there. Because of the way they blend, but in relation to fine wine, it's everything, just like it is anywhere else in the world, of course.
Well, one thing that I've noticed with Torbreck is your winemaker, Ian Hungel, he's not afraid for the vintage to express itself through the wine at all. I mean, he sometimes takes off some of the rough edges through some meticulous assemblage and blending and the like, and oak treatments in certain vintages. But the vintages do speak through the wines, I believe anyway.
Well, that's absolutely paramount. It's so important that the wine reflects the season. And when you have a vertical lineup of wines from one wine, for instance, if we did a vertical lineup of Woodcutter Shiraz from We just launched the 2022 now, X cellar, and you look at 22, let's just say back to 2010. And we do that from periodically at the winery in our tasting lab with our technical team. We look at the wines and they must reflect the vintage. They should be reflective of the vintage, because otherwise you're starting to make wines that are philosophically more about winemakers and less about the harvest. And Ian and the team and the technical team at the winery, Scott and others, we're about making wines that reflect the harvest. And so ingredient winemaking is not something that comes into favour at Torbreck. Ingredient winemaking is, yes, we give it so much oak, we keep it on skins for X amount of days, we'll pick it at a certain time each year. Well, the harvest changes. The weather patterns change. So you have to be able to negate that as much as possible through navigating those harvest years and saying, well, we don't want to make the wines that are philosophically of one person. They got to be philosophically of a style that reflects the harvest year.
I was just attending a tasting climate change in wine conference that took place in Montreal over the last few days. And I was wondering if in your time at Torbreck, you have been able to taste the impact of climate change throughout the vintages.
Without question. Right. Absolutely without question. So if we look at, and I've been at Torbreck 15 years now, so yeah. I started in 2009, but when we look at the wines that I've had, experience with, they go all the way back to the early 2000s. And so you can look at patches and I think blocks of periods of changing weather. And I just talked previously before we came on air about 21 through 23 that, those three wines are in the bank already. When I say in the bank, in the cellar or so in someone else's cellar, because we're launching 21s and 22s now, and 23s are sitting nicely and patiently in our cellar for launch next year and thereafter. And 24 we're about to harvest. We're only about 4 or 5 weeks away from harvest. So we think that block of 3 will actually turn into a block of 4, 21 through 24, because we think 24 is turning out more similar to the 3 aforementioned vintages than what we expected perhaps in the winter, when we were told by the Bureau of Meteorology that it's going to be drier and hotter and El Nino was coming back in a strong way, and hasn't really happened. So we've got this wonderful, fresh, as we anticipate, fresh, long harvest season, cooler, good levels of rainfall without any pressure, and nice levels of subsoil moisture. So I think 24 is shaping up really well. And touch wood, if something unforeseen happens, I hope it doesn't, and that would be a rain event. But we can't see that at this moment too much in the southern part of South Australia. So then you look at 04 through 06, they were a cool period, and then 07 through 09 was a very warm. Well, actually, it was hot, yeah, and they were difficult harvests. 07 was a difficult harvest. 08. We didn't make run rig in 2008. And then we moved into a cooling, a bit of a topsy-turvy period. 10 was spectacular, incredibly well balanced. Yeah. 11 was very, very wet. The wettest vintage since 74 in South Australia. Yes. And a lot of the wine we didn't make. We basically tapped out at Struy. The run rig, the Laird, the Ascendant Factor, we didn't make those wines in 11 because it was just too wet. But that was one out of the box. We haven't seen a vintage like that since 74. And then we went into a warming period again, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then a little bit cool, 17, 18, then warm again, 19, 20. And now this elongated, cool position right now. So it is changing. The word sustainability comes up in the wine business a lot. Yeah. We are sustainable practicing viticulturists and wine growers. We have a certificate for that, and you've got to jump through a lot of hoops through sustainable wine growing Australia to get that certificate. But one of the things that is really quite simplistic in sustainability is when you've got old vineyards that are up to 170 years of age, I'd call that sustainable.
I understand what you're saying there. Yeah. So A wine like this, you've got this very, I mean, it has that power, that intensity that people would expect from Barossa. But again, Torbreck always has this restraint as well, which I always enjoy. As I said, there's this vitality, this freshness in the wine. This is the wine that you want to steal people's hearts, right? This is the way that you get into people's hearts with the Torbreck philosophy, right? This is the one that most people have a chance to drink. A wine like this doesn't have too much oak at all. I think it's old oak barrels you're using for this, right? Puncheons or Foudre?
They're actually barrique, but they're all old. So
Oh, right.
the
Okay.
barrique,
Okay. I
the
think I was
the
reading the wrong.
barrique,
I was
the
reading the wrong
barrique.
vintage report
We
there.
use we use we use Foudre for our Grenache, and these are all barrique. But the
Ah,
barrique is 6, 7+ years of age,
yeah.
so there's no detectable oak influence on the wine anymore. Yeah, and if there is any new oak, it's less than 5%.
Okay.
So it'll depend on the harvest year. So the production's around about 40%. So, but the benefit here of woodcutters is that when we do our classification tastings, and a lot of we have this mix of single vineyard wines. So they are obviously a one site, one blend. There's no blend. So one site, it is what it is. And then when you have assemblage wines or blended wines, we have the luxury of classifying and then declassifying some of the material. So, for instance, the wine above this, which is double the price, the Struy, which sometimes gets into vintages from time to time, that wine is about $55 or $65, depending on price. Sometimes the fruit, in fact, always, some of the fruit that was designated for Struy falls out of those barrels and moves into
Declassified. Yep. Yeah.
be declassified. So that also helps in the level of complexity into the wine. It also gives the wine a incredible level of power, but also that restraint you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move up the totem pole of Barossa Shiraz at Torbreck, we're looking to retain that wonderful level of natural acidity and refinement. You know, I talk about sometimes a V8 engine with a handbrake on. In 30 years we won't be able to use that word V8 engine because kids will be scratching their head saying what. But an electric motor doesn't quite have the same ring. But that's what it is. They're powerful wines with restraint, and I think the best wines in the world are. Regardless of where they come from, whether it's Napa or Burgundy or Bordeaux or Barolo, it doesn't matter. They all have power and restraint, and they have this sort of nuance about them that's so important, but they have incredible intensity.
Well, with the level of balance and power and restraint in this wine here, and with your 19 years working at Torbreck, you must have done so many winemakers' dinners, so many events, tastings, and the like. What do you enjoy this wine with, or what have you enjoyed it with mostly over the course of the last almost 2 decades?
Sure, we're very fortunate to be able to export our wine to 50 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at just North America, all the provinces of Canada, we're represented, and nearly all the states of the US, for instance, just in North America. So, and then across Europe and Asia and everywhere else. So we certainly are an international wine company that people, and I'm talking to you in Upper Ontario. So we have a nice spread of our business. And I do get to, as an ambassador for the wine business and global sales and marketing director, I get out about a fair bit, and my export manager right now, as we speak, is in Stockholm. Oh, yeah. So he got on a few days ago. He was in Helsinki. Now he's in Stockholm, and he's in Europe for about 4 weeks. So he's treading the boards and doing the things that you just asked me. What I like about Woodcutter Shiraz is we taste it at almost every winemaker's dinner and every event that we have. It's part of the signature of Torbreck's wines, and I think people love the fact that it's so accessible price-wise, but it delivers so much complexity. And whether it's with a nice piece of ribeye or shall I say, a piece of venison or something from your part of the world, depending on the source, it goes so well, and people see so much more value in that wine in the glass than what they paid out of their wallet.
Sure.
And I think that it just delivers and over delivers and continues to over deliver, and hence we sell out of it every year. And vintages, for instance, take it up every year. We just had the LCBO actually in town through Wine Australia, which is the
All
governing
right.
body that helps. And we had a couple of the buyers at Torbreck for a tasting and dinner just last Monday, week ago.
Oh.
So it was nice to host them. And they were impressed with what they saw, not just at Torbreck, but with other Barossa winemakers who we also shared the room with that night.
Well, I really appreciate your time. It's the morning for you, it's the evening for me, and I have a whole bottle of Woodcutters to get through myself. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that. And it's nice to see you again. Hopefully, we will have a chance to share a glass together the next time you're in Ontario.
I look forward to that, Jamie. I'll be speaking with our agent soon, and we're planning.
Brilliant.
I come back every September, so about the middle of September. So we're planning that at the moment. So should I be back in your part of the world, I look forward to catching up and sharing a glass of Torbreck or maybe something else. Who knows?
That would be fantastic. To your health,
Good
Andrew.
on.
Take care.
And to yours. All the best, Jamie. Thanks.